Welcome back to Homesteading with the Zimmermans, where we work hard and play hard on our little corner of land in Iowa. My husband and I were born and raised Old Order Mennonite, or horse and buggy Mennonite, as some refer to them as. And although we are no longer part of that culture or community, we are intentional about passing on the old-fashioned skills of our childhood to the next generation. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Homesteading with the Zimmermans. My name is Ruth Zimmerman, and I am the voice and the creator behind our channel, our social media, our email list. And what that means is my Instapot is making my yogurt. It's telling me my milk is hot. Anyway, what that means is that when I go out of town, Homesteading with the Zimmermans stops. Nobody works on it except me. And so I've been in 6 weeks, I've had 5 out of town speaking engagements. So I've been doing the bare minimum. So number one, I meet my family's emotional needs. I take care of their nutritional needs. And then I make sure I have something filmed so that I can sit and edit. Well, this weekend I will be going on my very last away speaking tour or engagement, and I have run out of previously filmed content to just sit down and edit. So what that means is last week I didn't film anything. So what we're going to do today is I'm just going to answer some popular questions that I get about our family and our channel, and a lot of questions about the Amish and Mennonites. So that's what I'm going to do today. This will be more of a vlog style video where I answer questions. So one of the questions, because today actually is election day, right? So one of the questions I get often on my social media is, do the Amish and Mennonites vote? Or is it true that they don't vote? So I'm going to answer that to the best of my knowledge from my experience, right? So here's the other thing you have to understand. The Amish and Mennonites are so diverse that when I share from my experience, it doesn't mean that any church with the name Amish or Mennonite is the same way. I grew up Old Order Mennonite, which is a very traditional Mennonite. Like, they're some of the most traditional Mennonites. So horse and buggies, no media, no TV, no radios, no driver's license. Very similar to the Amish that drive horses and buggies. In my community, it was not popular for the Old Order Mennonites to vote. And I know the same is for the more traditional Amish groups. Now, like I said, those are the traditional groups. These names, Mennonite and Amish, are very, very diverse, and there is some that absolutely do vote. My community, the horse and buggy communities as a whole, don't. And it's strongly discouraged to go vote because they're pacifists, right? So they don't want to go to war. They're conscientious objectors. And for that reason, they don't want to get involved in public offices. They don't want to get involved in with the government. They don't want the government involved in their communities. And for that reason, they don't normally vote. One of the other reasons is they don't have driver's license. So to actually be registered to vote would require for them to, take an extra step and be registered to vote, where all of us that have driver's license, it's part of getting your driver's license. Do you want to be registered to vote? Is when you renew your driver's license. So most of them do not, because it's discouraged. It's strongly discouraged from their pulpit in their church to not get involved in government offices. My personal experience, I remember when it was an election that my father felt very strongly about, he would just quietly get on his bicycle, ride to the courthouse, and vote, and not make a big deal about it. The women don't vote. They feel like their husband, as the head of the house, will cast the vote for the household. So I've never known an Amish or Mennonite woman that will vote. They just leave that to the husbands. And so there is my experience with, do the Amish and Mennonites vote? The answer is the more traditional ones do not. Now there's exceptions. I know there is rebel groups within the churches, and that probably do go vote, just like my dad did when he felt strongly about something. But as a general rule, the traditional horse and buggy Amish and Mennonites do not vote. The more modern Amish and Mennonites, likely the men vote. And then I believe that there's probably some churches that are Mennonite that are not as traditional, that men and women vote. But the horse and buggy Amish and Mennonites, it's very unlikely that some of the men vote and none of the women will go vote.
And remember how Bush was excoriated because he only flew over New Orleans after us? But Biden didn't show up at all, and Kamala did that ridiculous camera. By the way, flying over.
So what were elections like growing up Mennonite? Well, because we didn't have, TV or anything like that, we had to wait till the next day when the newspaper arrived, when the daily paper arrived, to see who was the new president. And all it meant to me was that this was the name that I needed to add to the long list of presidents that I had memorized at school. So that's my curiosity mostly stemmed from that's the name to add to the memorized list. It didn't change my life as a child. It wasn't like I still had the same chores to do. It didn't affect anything in my childhood. And when I was remembering what presidential elections were like of my childhood, I was reminded of I can still have that same security that I had as a child, that somebody older and wiser, my dad, was taking care of everything. I was safe. I was taken care of. There was going to be food. And in remembering the elections of my childhood, it reminded me where to put my faith this week. That God is in control, and no matter the outcome, He is the one on the throne, and that I can trust and have faith that things are going to be the way they should be. In the end, I know who wins the battle. And so that's kind of where I've rested this week, is in remembering the security of living at home with a mother and father, that took care of me. And that's what I've want to remember this week through the election. My husband and I do vote. He votes, I vote. That is a privilege of living in America, and we are happy to cast our vote. And no matter the way it turns out, our God sits on the throne, and that's where we put our faith and our trust. Okay, one more thing about the election, and then I'm moving on to answer other questions. So the beauty of the way that God designed the human mind is that we have the cognitive skill to hold opposing ideas at the same time. So what this means is, for example, we are able to believe one way and still continue to have a relationship with somebody that believes the other way. So take opposing political views, for example. We have the mental ability to believe the way we believe while having a relationship with somebody that believes opposite of what we believe. Whether we choose to continue to have a relationship with them all comes down to character. Do we have the character to continue to have a relationship with them? So that has been what we teach our children, and what we try to practice ourselves, is that you can choose to have a relationship with people that believe differently than you do. So there's that question answered. Another question that I often get is, why don't you homeschool? And the answer is, we used to homeschool, and I loved it. I was all in. I really loved it. We had 2 young children, and then when we left the Mennonite community, homeschooling at that time was not popular amongst the Mennonites. So I was homeschooling, was all in. Oh, a little backstory. I used to be a teacher in the Mennonite one-room schoolhouses, and I taught 1st through 8th grade for 3 years before we got married. And it's not, Mennonite married women are usually not school teachers. So I got married, finished that term, and then gave birth to our firstborn that summer. So I taught school for 3 years, loved it. And that's kind of where my homeschool journey started, was because I loved teaching so much. And I just was like, I'm not paying to send my children to school when I know that I'm qualified to teach them everything they need to know. So we homeschooled, and then when we left the Mennonite community, we were at a church service, and the message was about idols that we create and hold more dear than we hold our salvation or our relationship with God. And I innocently went to the altar. There was an altar call, and I just prayed the simple prayer, and I said, God, show me where I have idols in my life. And immediately he showed me that homeschooling was an idol in my life, and that he was asking me to give it up. And it was very traumatic for me. It was a huge turning point in my faith, and it's where I learned what obedience feels like. I cried for a couple weeks because I didn't want to give it up, but I also knew that I wanted the peace that comes with obedience more than anything else. And so our church has a Christian school, a private Christian school. So that was 17 years ago, and we, started sending our children there and love it. We absolutely love our private Christian school. It's very close to our home.
Woo! Good job, Maxwell. Woo!
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now to the Christian flag.
I pledge allegiance to the Christian flag and to the Savior for whose kingdom it stands, one Savior, crucified, risen and coming again, with life and liberty for all who believe.
And now to the Bible.
I pledge allegiance to the Bible, God's holy word. I will make it a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. I will hide its words in my heart. Our oldest two daughters graduated from there. It goes all the way to 12th grade. It's K through 12. It's a small school, and we love the families and the children that are there. I volunteer there when I can. And all of that to say, the point of this story is not to make anybody that's homeschooling feel bad. Because like I said, I 100% support homeschooling, and I have family members that homeschool, and I love what they do. The point is, you need to walk in obedience to where God has called your family. That's all. Doesn't matter where that is. And I don't want to ever make it sound like because we send our children to private Christian school, we have all these opportunities that other people don't. Because I firmly believe that there's not a one size fits all. Each family has to know what they are called to and then be obedient. And that's where confidence comes from. Insecurity looks like constantly having to prove why your choice is the best choice for your family. Confidence looks like walking in obedience and knowing that even if it's not the most popular choice, being obedient to God and walking in His will is where the blessing is going to be. So if you're homeschooling, I 100% support you, and this is not meant to make you feel like you're doing something wrong. I'm only encouraging you to find what it is that God wants for your family and then be obedient. Is it hard to run a homestead and send the children to school? Absolutely not. We have all summer together. And I honestly, one of the things that I've loved about sending our children to school is that I've learned that it's not the quantity of time that you spend together, it's the quality of time that you spend together. And if we remember that relationships are primarily built on shared experiences, and we have lots and lots of opportunity to have shared experiences here on the homestead, even if my children are at school for a large part of the day and a large part of the year. I appreciate that they're at a Christian school. They're learning about God from people that I know and love and trust. And it's been a very good fit for us. Now, every fall before school starts, this is my prayer. Lord, you know that I would dearly love to homeschool, and I would homeschool in an instant. But if it's not your will, all I want is to be obedient, because I know that within that obedience, that's where our family is going to thrive like they wouldn't if I would just follow my own heart and do what I want to do. Anyway, so in a nutshell, that's why we don't homeschool. It's hard in the morning. So for the last 16 years of our children going to our private Christian school, school started at 8:30. And so this fall, they now begin their chapel at 8 a.m. So this fall has been rough because we have to get up earlier than we were accustomed to. So it's taken us a lot longer to find our morning rhythm. And we get up at 5:45. Chores are usually done by 6:45. And then, of course, there's breakfast and packing of lunches and studying for tests. And my children are learning a lot of time management skills that are serving them very, very well. And it's because we have to get up and get out the door at a certain time. And that's one of the things that I'm so grateful for, the opportunity to send them to school, because I know myself well enough. As a homeschool mom, we would not set alarms. We would get up when the sun gets up and get our chores done and then start school, And I really love that I have this opportunity to teach my children time management. Get up when the alarm goes, get your things done so that you can be at school on time. Anyway, if you have more questions about it, please let me know. But in a nutshell, that is why we don't homeschool. So another question that I get often is, why don't you grind your own wheat? Or have you ever ground your own wheat? Like for fresh ground wheat flour. So the answer is, I have a grinder. I used to grind my own wheat. I've gone, back and forth. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But after Harrison was born in 2016, I had a very traumatic birth and recovery, and it's a miracle that we're both here. And so I had 15 and 16-year-old daughters at the time, and they took over a lot of the kitchen work, right? And so it was easier just to buy all-purpose flour for them, because that was just easier. So I put my grinder away, and we haven't really gotten it out since. That's been 8 years. But here's the other thing that happened. Between Harrison's birth and now, I lost a lot of weight, and I learned a lot about diet and nutrition. And one of the things that I learned or one of the choices that I made for our family, is to, instead of grinding my own wheat and using whole wheat flour in everything that I make, we just limit the amount of flour products that we consume. So we don't have bread every day. We don't have pancakes and waffles. We just greatly limit our consumption of all-purpose white flour. If I do make bread, it's often sourdough bread, and then it's fermented, and I kind of feel like that it's a little better for you, and we just limit it. So that's kind of where our Friday night family dinner comes in. I'll make a nice dessert, and we'll, use the sugar and the flour. But what I learned through my weight loss journey was you can limit something. So I actually feel like our family is better off using white all-purpose flour as a treat and not using whole wheat flour on a day, like fresh ground whole wheat flour on a daily basis. I feel like we're healthier that way. So that's part of why I don't grind my own wheat, is because we've just really, really cut back on the amount of baked goods or flour that we use. And yeah, there's nothing, I don't have anything against whole wheat flour or, fresh ground whole wheat flour. It's just, it seemed more worthwhile for us to stick with all-purpose flour and use much less of it than to try to use whole grains, fresh ground whole wheat flour every day. Because if I understand it correctly, there's still gluten, and it just seemed we were healthier limiting our flour altogether. So that's why I don't grind my own, wheat berries. I'm not saying I'm never going to again, but for right now, this is what fits for our family. This is what's working for our family. We eat something with flour in maybe once or twice a week. Definitely not every day, and definitely not every meal. So there's that answer. Another question that I get a lot is, why don't you start your own seeds? like for the garden. Why am I not starting my own tomato seeds? Why am I not, starting my own brassica plants? And here's why. The community that we live in, the Mennonite community that we live in, I have a greenhouse. I have probably 5 different Mennonite greenhouses that I can visit within 20 miles. And two of those are actually my siblings. And so I'll just go there and buy my seedlings and support my Mennonite community around me. That's the number one reason. Number 2 reason is we don't live in a very large house, and we have very active boys, and every square inch of floor space gets used hard. And so right now, I'm still like, okay, that's outside play. You got to go outside. But come February and March, my standards have lowered because they need to get energy out. And there's things happening in my house, like ball playing and football moves and tennis and things that shouldn't happen in a house, but it does. And there is no safe place for seedlings, and it makes me cranky when they get damaged and I put all this time and effort in, and now they're spilled, and fragile little seedlings that I've babied are crushed. And my children's, their emotional needs come before my tiny little plants. So I don't want to put myself in a position where I have to be cranky and short to protect my seedlings rather than be gentle and thoughtful with my children. So all of that to say, that's why we currently don't raise our own seedlings. There will probably be a time when I will. Now that we have that big new building, I can, the boys will probably spend more time out there in the wintertime. But I still don't know where I would put my seedlings because, like I said, we use every square inch. And I'm not, it bothers me to see a lot of clutter. So and I like a lot of natural light, so I don't like to block my windows. But in our new building, there may be a time where I can set up, grow lamps or things inside one of those windows and have a little bit more of a protected space. I just don't see myself starting them inside my house. And here's another reason. The seedlings that I have been able in the past, when I've started them inside my house, have been so fragile compared to what I can get at the greenhouses. They get leggy, and here's the reason. Most newer houses have new windows, and even like in our case, we have a 120-year-old farmhouse, but we've replaced all the windows, and all newer windows are made with low E glass, right? So this blocks the UV rays. And what do the seedlings need to thrive? They need UV rays. So I know which of my windows are the cheapest windows. And so here's how I learned this. When we replaced all of our downstairs windows about 18 years ago, maybe, we replaced them soon after we moved in because the windows were so bad that we'd have little piles of snow drifts inside on the windowsills. That's how bad the windows were. So that was one of the first things we replaced, is the windows downstairs. And suddenly, all of my houseplants just died in the wintertime. No matter how much they were thriving in the wintertime, they died. No matter how much they were thriving in the summertime, they died when winter came. And so that's when I discovered that the windows we had put in were low E windows, and they were not allowing any UV rays to come in. So what I do is I crack the windows as long as I can, and I know which are those windows. When we remodeled and we put in these 4 big windows here to the west, I told Elvin, I said, let's please buy a cheaper window, because the more expensive the windows are, the more, just the more expensive the windows are, just the higher quality. The higher quality windows have higher quality glass. And in today's age, the high quality glass is low E glass. So when we bought these windows, I was along when we purchased them, and I made sure that it didn't say low E glass. Now, I know that because they're new windows, they probably have a certain, level of whatever the material is that blocks the UV rays, because they say they don't want your furniture and your carpets to fade, and that's why they use low E windows. But you can't grow things with low E windows. You cannot grow even houseplants if all of your windows are low E windows. And I can tell now. See that plant over there by the piano? Now we are still cracking the windows a lot. We've already got the in-floor heat on in our house, so it's warm in here, and I crack that window. But as soon as it gets bitter cold and I've got to keep the windows closed, I'll have to move that plant to a window that I know is not low E, because that window is low E, and what will happen is it'll start stretching and reaching for these windows, because these windows are not low E. So it'll be starving for light at those windows. Now, I believe that all newer windows have some level of low E glass in them. And that is why seedlings, when I try to raise them indoors, are just so fragile, because they're not getting enough light. And I haven't tried grow lights. I do think that changes things. But the seedlings that I buy from my sister's greenhouse are much more hardy and ready to go than the seedlings that I can grow. One of the reasons that I would start growing my own is because I have bought tomatoes at greenhouses and ended up getting a different fruit than what the tomatoes were labeled. So that's probably one of the reasons I would start growing my own in the future, is because I want to know that what I'm buying is actually what the tag says I'm buying. But as for right now, buying at a greenhouse serves us well. So one of the other things that I get asked, and I addressed this in a previous video, but I'll add it here because I'm answering questions, is why don't you have a freeze dryer? And I'm not anti-freeze dryer. It's not a fit for us right now. Number one, space and time and resources. Resources is we consume so much food that one freeze dryer full is like one meal for our family. And to be able, we only have the resources to grow like 18 to 24 months worth of food, right? We're not growing food for 10 years down the road. There's no need for me to freeze dry it in a way that it's preserved for 10 years. Because that would mean I'd have to buy extra food in, right? So we just don't have, we can consume everything that we can grow. We can consume it in under 2 years. And the way that I have been preserving it works well for 2 years. Now, if I were to get a freeze dryer, here's the scenario where I would get it. And believe me, I've had multiple freeze dryer companies reach out to me and want to gift me one. And I'm like, I'm not there yet. I'm not ready. I'll give it a number of years, because I believe they have a very, very smart marketing program, and I don't want to be influenced. I want to give it time and see how it all turns out. Same with the Berkeley water filters and the Air Doctor air filters. Some of these companies, I'm not saying that they're bad. I believe they've got a very smart marketing program, and I don't want to be influenced. I will wait and see what a difference it makes, or all of that. Anyway, all of that to say, here's the scenario where I can see us having a freeze dryer while in, say, the next 20 years. while Elvin and I are still able to grow a lot of food, but we don't have as many mouths to feed here at home, I can see us getting a freeze dryer and preserving food for our old age, so that when the time comes where we can no longer garden and grow enough food for us to eat, that we still have access to the quality of food that we want. So I can see that becoming, and even now, if we were able to grow excess, we could do that and store it for, in 10 years from now. However, we can consume everything that we can grow. So we don't have excess. Well, let's say corn. This year we grew a lot of corn. We have way more corn in the freezer than we need. But all that means is next year, instead of putting corn there, we will put more dried beans out, because that's something that I really need more of. So there's my point of why we don't have a freeze dryer, because we would have to buy food in to preserve for 10 years down the road. And I'm really just not sold on if it's worthwhile. But that doesn't mean that I'm judging you if you have one. You go. If you like it, then go right ahead. It's just not something that I feel it fits our lifestyle right now. So thank you everybody for being here. I have so many things on my list to share with you this winter. I'm so anxious to get started with some more recipes. So I've got cheese curds that I want to show you. I want to show you how we make our own remineralizing toothpaste and talk about, dental care. I want to make our own soap. There's so much I want to share, but those types of videos take up so much time, and on a week that I'm traveling, those just don't quite fit in as well. So I appreciate that you sit and watch these videos that are much easier for me to make, where I just sit and talk. And even though I know that when I come to edit this, my creative side's going to kick in, and I'm going to go search all through my footage to find footage to match what I'm talking about. But we thank you for being here. We appreciate you so much. And that brings us to the end of this week's video. Thanks for tuning in. And we will be back next week with not only entertainment, but inspiration and education as well.